Alright, let's go ahead and get started with lesson 2-7, solving equations with rational numbers. Now, we've been solving equations with regular numbers and integers and things like that. Well, today we're going to be using rational numbers, which is like, if you remember, decimals and fractions. Our objective today is to solve equations with rational numbers. Alright, let's take a look at this first example here. It says m plus 4.6 equals 9. Okay, and basically this is showing you what we have to do in order to solve this equation. Now, they're showing you the balance beam, which is the same way that I would have showed you right here. They just didn't have the line drawn there, but I could fill that in right there. And now I have my balance beam that you guys are used to. Now, we know that we have to get rid of this plus 4.6, and to get rid of that, we also know that we're going to have to subtract 4.6 from both sides. Okay, and so they subtract 9 minus 4.6. Now remember, whenever we're going to subtract these, we need to add our decimal to our 9 and a 0, so we have the same number of places, and subtract just like we normally would. Now whenever we get our answer, we get 4.4. Easy enough. Alright, let's take a look at our next example. In this one, it says 8.2p. Now that means 8.2 times p equals negative 32.8. Okay? Now, in order to solve this, we have to undo this multiplication right here. Well, how do we undo multiplication? Well, the opposite of multiplication is division, so that's what they do right here, is they're dividing by 8.2 on both sides here. Okay, so they divided 32.8 divided by 8.2. Remember, we have to use our over, up on these guys. Move that over once, and then straight up with the decimal. And then divide like you normally would, in which case they got 4. Then we need to go back and look at our signs. Well, if you look, our signs are different. We have one negative and one positive, therefore my answer has to be negative. Alright, good. Alright, on the third example here, it says x over 1.2 equals 15. Well, remember, in a fraction, that fraction bar means divide. Okay, so in this one, we're going to have to undo my division. Well, how do we undo division? Well, we multiply. So we have to multiply both sides times 1.2, and we get 18. Good. Let's work some on our own. All right, these are going to be the 4 examples that we're going to work together. Some of these are tough, some of them are easy, but we'll get through it. All right, let's take a look at example number 1. All right, this one says x minus 23.3 equals 17.8. Well, again, we know the first thing that we have to do is draw my balance beam right there with my equal sign. Okay, now I also know that I'm going to have to circle my minus 23.3, which means I have to get rid of that minus 23.3. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, hopefully you guys realize by now to get rid of that, we're going to have to add 23.3 to both sides. Over here, my 23.3's cancel, which leaves me with x equals. Okay, now I'm going to add these decimals up. Remember, whenever I'm adding decimals up, I have to line the decimal up. And drop my decimal straight down here. 8 plus 3 gives me 11. 7 plus 3 is 10, plus 1 is 11. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that gives me 41.4. So on this one, I know that x is going to equal 41.4. And that's all there is to it. Simple enough. Let's take a look at our next one. Alright, this one is a little bit more difficult. Not that much more, but the reason why it's a little bit more difficult is because on this one we're dealing with fractions. Okay? Alright, again, we know that we're going to have to get rid of this plus 2/3. Well, how do I get rid of plus 2/3? Well, I have to do the opposite, so I'm going to have to subtract 2/3. Okay, now this, minus 2/3 and plus a negative 2/3 are the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to add 2/3. That way my signs are the same. It makes it a little bit easier for me. Okay, so I know that I have negative 14 and 3/4, and I have negative 2/3. Now, what do I have to have whenever I'm adding and subtracting fractions? Well, if you remember, I have to have a common denominator. Okay, so I need to find a common denominator for 3 and 4. The reason why we're using 3 and 4 is because, well, those are my denominators here. I know that 12 is a common denominator for those, so that's going to be my denominator for both of these guys. I know that 3 times 4 is 12, so 2 times 3 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so I'm going to have negative 14 and 3/4. Excuse me, it is 3/4, but remember I found a common denominator, so that's what I want now. So I'm going to have to use that 9/12. 14 and 9/12 plus negative 8/12. Now, if you remember, whenever I'm going to add these guys, I'm just going to add straight across here. Our denominators stay the same, so I'm going to have 12. 8 plus 9 is 17, and then I also have my 14 over here. Okay, so I end up with negative 14 and 17/12. Now, am I done? Well, no, not really, because this 17/12, we can simplify that to 1 and 5/12. So we need to add that 1 back to the 14, which is going to leave me with 15 and 5/12. And that would be my final answer. See, that was a little bit more difficult just because it required a little bit more work. Not that it was really hard, but anyway, so let's take a look at our next one. All right, this one says 9y equals 3/5. Well, we know that this 9y right here means times 9. Okay, well, we know to get rid of that 9, we're going to have to divide both sides by 9. You have to excuse my division sign there. It didn't look very good, so let's try it one more time. Divided by 9. So my 9's cancel, which leaves me with y equals, basically I'm going to have 3/5 divided by 9. Now I'm going to go ahead and put 9 over 1, because remember, anytime we want to convert a whole number into a fraction, we just put it over 1. Now, I'm dividing my fractions. What's my rule for dividing fractions? Hopefully you guys remember this, but it's copy dot flip. Okay, copy dot flip. So I'm going to have to copy down my first fraction of 3/5, change my division to a dot, and flip that second fraction, so that's going to be 1 over 9. Now, I can multiply straight across now, which 3 times 1 is 3. 5 times 9 is 45. Now, I can simplify that by 3, because 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 45 15 times. So my answer would be 1/15. Not terribly difficult, I don't think. All right, let's take a look at our next one. All right, our last example says d divided by 4 equals 2/3. So again, I have to undo my division on this one, which means I'm going to have to multiply times 4 on both sides. So my 4's cancel, which leaves me with d equals, okay, so I'm going to have 2 and 3/8 times 4. Remember, I have to put that 4 over 1 so I can multiply these. But again, hopefully you guys remember my rules for multiplying fractions. The first thing I have to do is I'm going to have to popcorn method that. Remember? So I can change that into an improper fraction, so I'm going to have to multiply 2 times 8, which is 16, plus 3 gives me 19 over 8, times 4 over 1. Now, I'm going to multiply like I normally would. Now on this one, just by looking at it, I realized that, look at this, we have an 8 down here on the bottom, we have a 4 up here on the top, which means we can simplify these before we multiply. Because I know that 4 goes into 4 one time, and I know that 4 goes into 8 two times. Now that makes my multiplying much easier, because I didn't know what 19 times 4 was, but I do know what 19 times 1 is. That's just 19. Okay, and 2 times 1 is 2. Now we know that we have to simplify that, so we'll divide up. 19 divided by 2 gives us 9. 18, remainder of 1, so we're going to put that 1 over the number we divided by, the 2. So 19 over 2 equals 9.5, which is going to be my answer. So as you can see, none of these questions are terribly difficult. As long as you work them out step by step and remember your rules, you shouldn't have a problem. All right, good luck.